And I'd like to call the candidate for APC to please make his opening comments for 10 minutes. Your time starts now, sir.
Thank you very much.
The more you clap, the more you take his time.
That's okay. So my voice will be a bit cocky. I'm speaking a whole lot. The president of the chambers, I want to extend thanks to you and to your board and other chairpersons that have come to grace this occasion. All the other participants, my co-contestants, Mr. Agbaje, and the moderator, and of course, men of the press. I stand in front of you humbly this morning as a 53-year-old Nigerian, first and foremost, but more importantly, as a Lagosian. In the last 30 years or so, out of the 53 years, I've had the opportunity to walk past a university called University of Lagos, and I studied a degree called Surveying in Faculty of Engineering. The last 30 years after qualification, I have had the privilege of working 17 years in the private sector and about 13 years in the public sector. On the private sector side, I started actually as a seismic data acquisition surveyor, meaning that I was doing 6 weeks on, 3 weeks off in the whole of the Niger Delta. And I moved on to places where we have a Boko Haram issue now in my degree. I did that for 3 years, and I started a startup company for a year. And it was very typical of startups in the 90s. It didn't survive more than 9 months. So I understand what a startup is, because it was a company that was meant to be reliant on power and telephone, and that were not in a whole lot of supply there. So moving on, I found myself in the finance industry. I was treasurer for 3 banks at different times. I was head of investment banking. I was running both the local currency desk and the foreign currency desk of 3 financial institutions. I have managed assets of banks. I have created wealth at those levels. I have managed liquidity issue. I have run as consultants with BP, even during that space. I have created transactions that would appear that were very difficult, right, but were able to unwind them as an investment banker. And I was privileged in 2002 to be the youngest person that came to the cabinet of the then governor, Ashwaji Bola Ahmed Tinubu, first as a special advisor to the deputy governor and subsequently special advisor to the governor. Within the first 1 year, I imagine I traveled almost every part of the world, curating relationships and starting up what started at that time as the special advisor corporate matters, meaning that my portfolio was the first engagement of private sector and public sector portfolio, given my background in that. Within a year, I became the acting commissioner for economic planning and budget, meaning I had a rare privilege of taking the budget of Lagos State at that time twice to the House of Assembly to defend it. Moving on, the latter part of that administration, I became the Honorable Commissioner for Commerce and Industry. And I humbly say that at that time, I'm sure I had a relationship with some of the very distinguished members of this association, the LCCI. We created what we see today as the Lekki Free Trade Zone, and a lot of initiatives that were done within the last 9 months of that administration. Moving very quickly, in 2007, I became humbly too the Honorable Commissioner for Establishment, Training and Pension, meaning that I had the responsibility to oversee and run the entire civil service, 127,000 and counting at that time. We created a robust civil service in which capacity development, human capital setup, in fashioning the civil service went about. But beyond the responsibility of doing civil service, we set up the first pension bonds in the country. We were able to move our pensioners from the pay-as-you-go to the contributory pension, the first in the country. I dare say that also I was uniquely opportune to have paid the first minimum wage even at that time. But moving on, I also had the rare privilege of setting up the Security Trust Fund, which we all know today as one of the selling points of the government of Lagos, which other states had created as a sort of copy. Also uniquely, with all sense of humility, not using the word I, but a team, but led the team that set up Lagos, which is the Lagos Asset Bus System, which you all see on the BRT corridor today as another first in sub-Saharan Africa. I also had the unique opportunity of setting up the 767, the 112 Control and Command Center, even within that 4-year space. Not directly even as commissioner for any of those, but engaging the private sector. Within the first 3 months that we started the Security Trust Fund, with the support of the private sector, we were able to aggressively improve the capacity of the men of the Nigerian police by pushing over 300 vehicles, giving them arms and ammunition, and supporting them in terms of their running costs and overhead for diesel and all of it. And so, moving on, I left government in 2011, not wanting to do a third time, as it was not fashionable then, right? So I went back into the private sector, not also wanting to forget where my roots started from, which was in the private sector, and I had the opportunity to have been engaged in privatization. The entire spectrum of PHCL privatization, I was involved. I actually had a bid to win either the Disco or the Genco, although of course we didn't win. Moving on, I went into massive real estate investments with some other partners. I went also into construction, also given the experience that I've gathered and pushing back using private sector funding with government. But more importantly, within that space, I was able to give back to my community. I was using those 4 years to train and to develop young skills in Lagos State. And how do I mean? We set up NGOs, we set up organizations that were throwing back in terms of capacity development, in terms of pro bono support for a lot of young people in Lagos Island, in the whole of Lagos Central, and there are records to test to that. So I was doing all of that as my own part of contribution to the skills that I've acquired, and more importantly, to the little finances and access that I can bring about. I also was involved in training cabinet members of various state governments, working with DFID and some of the international partners there. In 2016, very uniquely as well, and we call sense of responsibility, I was also appointed by the current administration as the managing director and chief executive of LSDBC, which is the foremost property development company for the states. And within 2 years, we were able to set into that corporation a review and a restructuring I've ever seen in the last 70 or 80 years that has been in existence. And it's there for everybody to also check what we've done. We created 14 transactions that we did not take a cover from the treasuries of government. We created 14 PPP transactions that were all private sector-led real estate investment that are live, that are working. Some are even on this corridor for emphasis. We don't need to begin to mention it. And what we created within those 2 years was the belief that in truth, with the private sector, you can create relationship with the public sector. Why are we here today? We're here standing as a candidate of APC to come and govern your state, my state, a state that all of us are truly passionate for, Lagos State, that has the 5th largest economy in Africa today, that has a population that is growing at a rate higher than the federal government, that has a vehicular density that is 3 times any part of its nation, that has the traffic on a daily basis that surpasses a lot of other major cities in the world, that has 2 more minutes, 10 minutes. Just on a final note, what I've brought here is a project called T. T for traffic management and transportation, E for health and environment. The M is to make Lagos the 21st century economy. The other E there is education and technology, and the last E is entertainment and tourism. The one that is critical to the private sector is making Lagos the 21st century in infrastructure, in security, in ensuring that issues that concerns you around creating wealth for your businesses, creating opportunities for the private sector to try to be able to do their businesses in a safe, sound, secure environment, and also knowing that 85% of the GDP of the state rests with you, knowing fully well that it's only when we create a lot of PPPs, a lot of interactions and engagement with you, understanding that what you require is a nimble, is a fast civil service, is a fast government establishment that will be live up to the responsibility, understanding what your requirements are.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. We will now have the candidate of the PDP, Mr. Jimmy Agbaje, 10 minutes.
The President of the Chamber, Vice President, members of the Chamber, President Ican, distinguished panelists, my co-contestant, Mr. Sanwo-Olu, distinguished members of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. My name is Agbaje. I am the governorship candidate of the People's Democratic Party for Lagos State. An indigenous Lagosian, born and bred in Lagos. Probably spent all my life outside traveling up and down for holidays and all in this Lagos, apart from when I had to go to a better university than Mr. Sanwo-Olu went. The great University of Ife, now Gubernatorial University. I'm a pharmacist by profession, and at the age of 27, I set up my own pharmaceutical practice, JK Pharmacy Limited. Started as a one pharmacy outlet, and until the time I was retired from JK Pharmacy in 2005, I had built JK Pharmacy to where we had multiple outlets, to where we went into small-scale manufacturing and expanded into bigger-scale manufacturing where we have a factory. I also, JK Pharmacy, in my time, was representing major multinational, transnational companies in this country as sole agents. Having said that, as regards my profession, I have been very active in the pharmacy profession. I would say that I've occupied nearly all positions that could be occupied in terms of service to my profession. I have been honored with the fellowship of the Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria. In fact, I believe I'm on record to have been the youngest fellow when I was given fellowship in my time. So I'm a fellow of the Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria. I'm a fellow of the West African Postgraduate College of Pharmacists. I am fellow of the Nigerian Academy of Pharmacy. In terms of recognition, I am also the holder of the Office of the Order of the Niger. This was given to me with regards to, as it was said then, for my contribution to pharmacy and to politics. So I'll go on to my political profile. I started politics as a political activist after the annulment of the June 93 elections. I was very active in the pro-democracy era, fighting for democracy for our country. I was part of the concerned professionals with the likes of Agbaje, Peterside, Professor Patrick Tomi, and we worked together to fight for democracy in our country. From political activism, when the politics or ban on politics was lifted, I, of course, went into politics. I joined the social political organization at Ferry. I was a very active member of that organization. I was the treasurer of Ferry. But more importantly, I was the secretary of the political committee of Ferry. So I have been in politics since the year 1998. I have learned a lot in this process, and my coming in to run for office in 2019 is not by mistake. We have today in Lagos a population in excess of 20 million, and by the records of those in government, a net flow, the net inflow of 1 million migrating into Lagos every year. So what you have is a situation where we must address Lagos issues very differently. It is not about incremental development like other states. When people are coming into your state in bits, it is easier to manage. But when they're coming in droves, then it's got to be different. And you will know, for some of you, that I had run in 2007, just like I had attempted to be governor in 2015. And this is my third attempt. In 2007, I recognized the megacity nature of Lagos, requiring a different approach to governance. And a theme of that campaign was New Thinking, New Lagos. And it was deliberate. In 2015, we came up again and talked about bold ideas, new opportunities. In 2019, we're talking about re-anchoring Lagos, again for good reason. I'm putting myself forward to ensure life is worth living in a Lagos state whose economy is thriving for all Lagosians. A Lagos state that our youth can see a future. That is, in a nutshell, why I am running. Our campaign focus is on a tripod. And again, for those who are very much active on the social media, you would have seen that our manifesto is out there in the public domain. It's based on a tripod of livability, of the economy, and of the future. And so, we're saying that it's important that if we're going to address the challenges of a mega city like Lagos, we must address those issues as I have listed. When we talk about livability, we talk about education, we talk about health, we talk about infrastructure, we talk about culture and environment, and we talk about human capital. Again, in this opening statement, it is to give you a brief of what we're talking about. And that's for livability. In terms of the economy, of course, we talk about we're talking about an efficient economy. We have to be more efficient in a mega city like Lagos. We talk about job creation, which is about growing the economy and diversifying that economy. And on that basis, we talk about looking in terms of diversification. We, in 2015, talked about opportunities in our water when we talked about ocean economy. We're saying that when we look at the economy of today and tomorrow, it is a knowledge economy. And that it's time that we look at the opportunity in that knowledge economy and add it as a way of diversifying the economy. We believe that we can create a whole new economy around education, just like other countries have done, Singapore, China, and we can continue. That education in itself can be a focal point of an economy. Again, in the course of this debate, I will try and expatiate on it. We talk about the future for our people, the future for our youth. The hopelessness must be removed. Our youth must be able to see a future in Lagos. Because if you ask them today to choose between going abroad, to Europe, to America, to Canada, or to stay in Lagos, I'm sure you know that the answer will be very clear. In our time, we went to those countries. We took our bursaries, we took our scholarships, and traveled to those countries. We had no intention to stay in those countries. And so we must give a future to our youth. We must give that future to them. And so we're talking about entrepreneurial governance, which again is not new in terms of what we are trying to sell. Entrepreneurial governance basically is accepting that there are opportunities that people can leverage on. That it is the duty of government to create, to facilitate, not participate, but to facilitate that environment for people to thrive on. And therefore that requires a new orientation on the part of government, on the part of the civil service, of the public service. It becomes important that the private sector is seen as a partner. So that's in terms of the future. I like to keep to time. So livability, the economy, and the future. That's where we stand, the tripod today. Jimmy Agbaje has been consistent over the years. It's got to be different. It's not about incremental development. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank the candidates for being time sensitive. I will ask at this point that they both be standing so we can reduce the time of going up and down from the seat to the podium. While I invite our panelist, Mr. Nidi Yusuf, to take the first question. And the response will be 30 minutes each, starting with APC for the first question, and the second question will be starting with PDP, and then we'll keep rotating until we either get a new rule or we are done. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Frank. Good morning. On traffic and transportation, the traffic situation in Lagos has been chaotic of recent. Both of you alluded to the fact that it's a mega city with excess of 20 million passengers, residents. So it'd be nice to know your thoughts on how to improve the traffic situation in Lagos. That's one. Let me bundle it with Apapa. Apapa has become a chaotic situation. So again, what specific cogent ideas do you have around improving Apapa? And thirdly, ensuring the same thing does not happen in Lekki. There's a lot of investment in the Lekki assets. How do we ensure Apapa doesn't repeat itself in Lekki, all around transport and traffic?
Thank you very much, Yusuf. That's why in my first T, in my theme, traffic and transportation. And it's because we've also done a study around it. For traffic, we've done a quick study. We've realized there are over 63 or 64 traffic results in Lagos. And each one of them have a unique solution that we need to bring about. Some are low-hanging that we can solve in 6 months, some are fairly more detailed. I give a simple example, right? Some of the traffic junctions are just barely caused by reduction of the roundabouts. And a typical example is what had happened on the Lekki corridor. We have huge roundabouts that needs to be reduced just to reduce traffic. In some places, it's just to introduce traffic lights and traffic furniture. There's a junction on this road if you're on IGDB and you want to go into Acme, right? When you're coming from Ile-Ife by that school, the traffic coming out from that place, you just need to increase the lay-by. We have gone there physically. We've done the measurement. You can give 2 more lanes on that lay-by such that people coming from Cadbury need not wait for that junction to slow them down. And you can have your own 2 lanes as you're coming and the cabin one will continue. Those are some of the little solutions that we can bring about in traffic management. And of course, the way of life. We need to talk to our people, ensuring that we need to give road users some opportunity as well. For transportation as well, just to quickly take it, is to look at a comprehensive transportation system using rail, water, and of course the buses, which is the lines, right? I would say that we're making closure on the rail transportation. I was in the government when we started about 8 years ago. They're on the bridge now. The pilots are out. Is to ensure that we quickly complete the rail project, right? And we put the tracks on it. There's another one, which is the red line, which is from Ebutemeta to Agege. That corridor, PDP held us for 7 years, not giving us access to have that corridor. It's an existing corridor. But thank God we have it now. So they're cleaning it up, right? And we can put a red line there. The third one, which is the waterways, right? The solution for waterways is what we realize is it's usually one traffic directional, meaning people leave Ikorodu, come to VI, and the return journey is always empty. So what we're going to do is to either up their capacity, right, or come up with some bit of subsidy. And of course, do channelization and put balls on the waterway so that they go through the easiest, shortest possible direction. Quickly to go to Apapa. Apapa is a nightmare. There are individuals that we need to have strong, hard conversations with. Those trucks and containers or whatever, right? They were somewhere before a year ago. So how come? I'm aware that there's a land that was inside the ports, right? in which they've been taken out and they're not accessing them. For Lekki, we're meant to do what we call a regional road that will improve. Thank you very much.
I have 3 minutes, right? 3 minutes. Thank you. Well, Mr. Sanwo-Olu represents the constituency that has been in charge of Lagos for the last 20 years. They spent 7 trillion naira, and he's still talking about his study, or they're talking about his study on how to improve traffic. When we talk about re-anchoring Lagos, we're saying we need to go back. You know, we put the re deliberately. Because there was a time we had a governor in the state who thought that we need to think ahead, who decided that there was need to open the Lekki Ekpe axis, who thought that there were things that needed to be done. But in 20 years, we've had people that are still talking about study. After 7 trillion naira, they're still talking about incremental issues. That cannot work in Lagos. Like you said, we've got a refinery coming up. Are we going to have tankers lining up against the roads on that axis? No, we've got to think differently. We're a mega city. The only mega city, well, one of the 2 mega cities in the world that does not have any multimodal system of transportation. It is time we started thinking about having multi-tiered routes. There's nothing to it. The world is moving. We can't be different. We need to start thinking of having 2 layers of road. That is what progressive people are doing today. We need to start looking at the real system. He's talking about a real system that they're working on. They've been working for over 10 years. It is not concluded. Ethiopia did it only in 4 years. What is the problem in having this line? He talks about a PDP disturbing the blue line or the red line. The blue line has already disturbed. What is happening to it? So don't let us use excuses. We're saying that line that is being done is being disturbed because it is not being done properly. Lines like this are run on a PPP basis. It is not the way it is being handled. And it's important we begin to look at that. So we need to have these big ideas to address problems and challenges that are not peculiar to Lagos. They're peculiar to every mega city. Multi-tiered roads is important. We need to begin to look at our water. We talked about an ocean economy. This takes care of everything in terms of ocean economy. And water, we're not having water transportation the way it should be. We must begin to address water. We need to address the rail. Thank you.
May I once again remind us of the rules of engagement here this morning. When you have your rallies, you can clap and drum for your candidates. This is not a rally. Please. Mrs. Williams will take the next question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Igogun. Moving away from the area of transportation, I would like us to focus on another major area of friction between the private sector and the state government, and this is the issue of multiple taxation. With the economy as it is now, the average business is grappling with low sales, low patronage, and yet, in Lagos State, we are being made to pay radio and television license, vehicle license, LASA, all manners of taxes, including water abstraction tax, for a service that we should rightly demand from the government. So the question is, what will be your approach to this issue? As some of the computations I was shrouded in secrecy, there's some ambiguity related to some of these taxes. What would be your own approach? Thank you.
Well, I think the first thing is that government must look at itself as the facilitator of development of the economy. We say that the economy of Lagos is the 5th largest economy. We want it to be the 2nd largest economy in Africa. And if you come from that paradigm, then it means you're going to be asking yourselves, how are you going to help the private sector to develop, to grow this economy. And so, one thing you are going to do is to address the issue of ease of business. Because it's part of the ease of doing business that makes you decide that regulation is a means of extracting money from the private sector. And I think it's a very wrong paradigm where government believes that it will use its regulatory powers to draw money out of the private sector. It is not looking at the private sector as a partner. We're saying that the private sector is a partner, and therefore you're going to have to streamline those taxes because it's just not working. And Mr. Sanwo-Olu has acceded to the fact that he has tried his hands in the private sector. And because of the issues of the private sector, he could not survive in that sector. It is the same way that you must look at it and say that you have to address these issues. And therefore, it's important that one, we streamline those taxes, we look at government and the private sector as partner in this matter. And that is what we're looking at. That is what we must do if we want to make progress. The private sector cannot be seen as just a source of income. It must be seen as a partner in progress.